Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being taken down to its nuts and bolts. Alright folks, things are still a little busy here, but I do actually have time this week for a proper episode. It might not be that long of an episode, but the good news is I am choosing, by fan request, a universe where ships are not actually the big deal. And that would be the Halo universe. Now, I have only played through Halo 3 ODST. I am actually working on Halo 4 presently. I have not played any of the real-time strategy games or anything other really than the first-person shooters. I haven't read the books. I haven't read the comics. You get the picture at this point. But all that's beside the point. Right now, we're actually going to talk about the UNSC Pillar of Autumn. And actually, we should start right there. How cool is that name? I mean, seriously, it's rather distinctive and notable. And you can use it as either the Pillar of Autumn or Pillar or Autumn. I mean, it's a good name. And that's something that's almost consistent with the UNSC ships, because there's also the In Amber Clad. All right, also very distinctive, very notable, something that kind of evokes a mental image for you. And then there's my own personal favorite, the Forward Unto Dawn. Okay, that's just cool. That evokes like cavalry charges and a last dying attempt to try and breach the enemy lines or do something equally cool and make it to dawn. I mean, that's a seriously cool name. And then for whatever reason, the UNSC went and jacked that all up with the UNSC Infinity. Okay, did you let your kid name that thing or something? I mean, yeah, okay. It's the biggest, baddest, most powerful ship the UNSC has ever built, but really? Infinity? That's the best you can do? Come on, guys. And actually, now that we're talking about names, someone take a note and remind me at some point in the future to do an episode on naval traditions, because naming ships is a very important tradition, and it has a lot of other traditions revolving around it. But that's a thing for another episode. Anyways, like I said, we're talking about the Pillar of Autumn today, and put simply, this ship is what happens when you tell a capital ship designer to make an A-10 Warthog into a capital ship. It's part of the Halcyon class, and the first 11 ships in that line, including the Pillar of Autumn, were built with this bizarre-ass honeycomb structure inside of them that basically made them damn near invulnerable. They were supposedly capable of still functionally engaging the enemy with over 90% of their armor missing, simply because the entire thing was just one massive collection of pressure compartments and reinforced structure. Yeah, you blasted off all the armor, cool, but you gotta cut through all of these miles and miles and miles of frickin' support inside of it. Unfortunately, the frickin' support is why only 11 out of 50 Halcyons have this particular feature. It turns out support is really, really heavy, which makes the ship really, really slow and really, really awkward to maneuver. So the remaining 39 had some indeterminate internal structure that was never clarified at any point that I'm aware of. Also, the entire ship is basically an excuse to put a Mac gun in space. And Mac is the Halo terminology for a magnetic accelerator cannon, or a linear accelerator, or a railgun of ginormous proportions, or anything that takes a very, not small, I guess, car-sized chunk of solid metal and puts it out there at some significant fraction of the speed of light. Now, the fun thing is it is literally built into the ship. The Mac gun might as well function as the keel of the ship. You have to point the ship directly at whatever you want to shoot with this Mac gun and hope you hit, because there's no real aiming aside from pointing the ship. So, yeah, it's an A-10. It's basically indestructible, and it has a really honking big gun in its nose. Now, it does also have other weapons, including missiles and point defense weapons and coil gun batteries and autocannons, and it carries a whole squadron of fighters and transports and ground assault vehicles, and it can even drop pods directly out of its ventral section and deploy troops directly itself if it wanted to, and it has all kinds of other stuff on board it. It is, in short, a warship. But actually what we're going to talk about today is the somewhat peculiar design of it. It does kind of resemble what I think a near-future human space vehicle when we have artificial gravity might look like. I mean, let's face it, we tend to be a little brutalistic and a little function over form when it comes to designing things. You saw this a lot, actually, in Babylon 5, with the Omega-class destroyers. Apparently, all designers seem to be of the opinion that it's going to take us Humies a little while to figure out how to streamline our ships, and realistically, why would you streamline your ships unless you're doing it for armor purposes? After all, as we've discussed previously, there is no atmosphere in space. And this thing is already armored out the wazoo to begin with, so, I mean, it doesn't really need to worry about sloping armor. But even so, it is kind of interesting to see how the design does allow for things like, batteries to fire past each other, as opposed to the Venator from Star Wars, where all 4 of its side turrets couldn't shoot forward. Only one of them could. In the Pillar of Autumn's case, pretty much every single gun it has can shoot forward simultaneously, which again makes sense given that you have to point the entire ship at the target to use the MAC gun. Well, while you're charging up the MAC gun, might as well lay into it with everything else you have. Now, there are some interesting little quirks on it, too. For example, humans, while we do have artificial gravity, do not have gravitic drives in Haloverse. In fact, we seem to rely on the nearly ubiquitous fusion reaction drives that seem to come up in all the science fiction these days. But my larger point is that since it does have normal reaction drives, it does need to, break itself when it's in space. And it accomplishes this not by flipping and burning, but by rather having retro engines built into the forward section of the engine section, basically. It's a good idea, aside from the fact that the engines seem to be pointed directly at some of its batteries. Fusion rockets do let off superheated plasma, so I hope those batteries are very well armored, since us humans also don't have shields yet. Anyways, now, what we're actually doing this whole episode about, and what we are driving towards this entire time, is I am sure my fellow geeks and nerds and so on and so forth who played Halo remember the final episode of the first game. I think the level was called Maw, when Master Chief has to escape from the Pillar of Autumn and make it to a ship before the autumn blows and takes Installation 04 with it. It was your typical, now typical thing, because Halo seems to have done it in almost every other game at this point, vehicle run, where you jump in a vehicle and you have to navigate this bizarrely complex track full of baddies and things exploding around you and stuff going on, and make it to a point in enough time that whatever's happening doesn't happen with you inside of it. It's a thing. I think all the Halo games have them at this point. Anyways, the point is, the Maw's Warthog run covers about 3 kilometers of track, and admittedly the track is not perfectly straight. There are some bends, there are some dips, there are some inclines, so on and so forth, blah blah blah. Well, the problem is the Pillar of Autumn and the entire Halcyon class is only 1.1 kilometers long. And I'm not great at math, my wife can tell you that, but I'm pretty sure 3 is more than 1.1. In fact, there's been some funny graphics about this explaining how this could maybe work. And it's even funnier because, like I said, the exterior of the Autumn is kind of neat with all these stacked octagons and hexagons and so on and so forth. And you can kind of see how the track could drop from the top spine of the ship where the Warthog run starts and keeps stepping down those little steps towards the front. But that's kind of the problem, is the steps don't seem to match, and the run starts in the middle of the ship and goes forward. So even though the ship is 1,170 meters long, which of course is a call out to Spartan 117, you only are covering half of that in 3 kilometers of driving in an almost straight line. Yeah, okay. We're just going to have to write that one off to artistic license. In the end, creative geometry or not, the Pillar of Autumn is the Timex of the Halo warships. It took a licking and kept on ticking, and it actually ended up being the first ship to ever destroy a Halo installation. Of course, it accomplished that by overloading its fusion reactor and taking the installation with it, but, it still counts, right? And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube. Have a good day.